Power isn't proven by noise, it's revealed in silence. In a world where everyone is screaming to be heard, where arguments dominate conversations and loud opinions flood every space, it's easy to believe that volume equals strength. But real strength isn't measured by how loud you can yell or how hard you can hit back. It's measured by how still you can remain in the face of chaos, by how calmly you can walk away when everything in you wants to stay and prove a point. Walking away silently isn't a retreat, it's a declaration. It says, I don't need to win this. I don't need to be right. I don't need to convince you of anything, because I already know my worth. Silence is misunderstood. People think silence is submission. They think if you're not fighting, you're losing. But the truth is, silence is often the loudest response. It speaks volumes without saying a word. It shows that you've mastered the art of control, not just over your words, but over your emotions, your reactions, your energy. And mastering your emotions is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of strength. Because anyone can react, anyone can lash out when they feel hurt, disrespected, or misunderstood. But it takes someone with real discipline to pause, breathe, and choose silence over chaos. When you walk away silently, you're not walking away because you're afraid. You're walking away because you've realized that not every battle is yours to fight. You've realized that arguing with someone who refuses to understand you is a waste of your breath. You've realized that your energy is sacred, and spending it trying to convince someone of your value is beneath you. There's a certain elegance in silence, a quiet dignity. It's the kind of power that doesn't seek applause. It doesn't demand recognition, it simply exists. And it's felt deeply by those who witness it. Think about the last time you walked away from something or someone that was draining your peace. Not with rage, not with a dramatic exit, just silence. At that moment, you didn't just walk away from them. You walked toward yourself. You chose yourself. And in that choice, you claimed your power. Because power is not control over others. Power is control over yourself. It's choosing peace when war would be easier. It's choosing clarity when confusion begs for attention. It's choosing your future over your pride. People may not understand your silence. They may call it cold, distant, or passive. Let them. Their misunderstanding of your silence is not your responsibility to correct. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. The very act of not explaining yourself is the proof of your power. So the next time you feel tempted to respond, to argue, to defend yourself, pause. And remember, the strongest move is often no move at all. The loudest statement is often the one you don't make. Real power doesn't make noise. Real power walks away in silence. Silence is the final word of strength. It is not the absence of a response, but the presence of deep understanding. It's not about weakness or surrender, it's about restraint, awareness, and the power to rise above what no longer deserves a reaction. In silence, there is clarity. In silence, there is maturity. And most of all, in silence, there is healing. When someone chooses not to react, when they hold back words that could burn, when they turn away from conflict without a single retort, they are not giving up, they are moving on. They are choosing to rise where others would sink. They are demonstrating a strength that doesn't shout, it simply is. Those who react loudly are still tied to the pain. They haven't broken free from the emotions that grip them. They argue because they still care about being heard, about being understood, about being right. They raise their voice because the wound is still open, the ego is still bruised, and the need for validation still controls their response. Loud reactions are often just pain in disguise, pain seeking acknowledgement, pain demanding attention. It is a sign that something still has power over you. But the one who walks away silently, that person has already let go. They've already processed the pain. They've accepted that closure doesn't always come through conversation, that peace doesn't always follow resolution. They've understood that not everything needs to be explained, not every insult needs a reply, not every betrayal deserves a response. Silence, in this context, is the loudest form of self-respect. It says, I know what happened, I know how I feel, and I don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even to you. To remain silent when provoked requires strength. It's far easier to react, to fire back, to meet force with force. But true strength is not about winning verbal battles. It's about knowing which battles are worth your time and which ones are just distractions dressed as importance. When you no longer feel the urge to react, you've reached a place of inner calm that cannot be shaken. You become untouchable, not because nothing affects you, but because you've learned how to protect your peace at all costs. The silent walker doesn't need the last word. They don't need to be seen as the victor in anyone's eyes. They don't need applause or agreement. They are free. Free from the need to justify, to correct, to prove. Free from the emotional chains that hold others back. And in that freedom, they found power. A power that doesn't show off, but is felt by everyone who comes close. Let others be loud. Let them argue, accuse, defend, and demand. You don't have to match that energy. You don't have to descend into their chaos. You are not there to play their game. Your silence is not your weakness. It is your exit. It is your shield. And most of all, it is your answer. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every comment, insult, betrayal, or misunderstanding is worth your time or reaction. Energy is a limited currency, and how you spend it defines the life you live. If you give your energy to every conflict, every person trying to provoke you, every situation that drains you, you'll be left empty, worn out, disconnected from your purpose. That's why walking away, especially in silence, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's the conscious decision to preserve what truly matters and let go of what doesn't. When you walk away silently, you're making a powerful statement without saying a word. You're declaring that your peace is more valuable than any argument. That your focus is too important to be wasted on distractions. You're not avoiding confrontation because you're afraid. You're choosing not to engage because you've outgrown the need to fight battles that lead nowhere. Silence is not a void. It's a sanctuary, and only those who've learned to value their inner world will understand the strength it takes to choose peace over chaos. Every time you stay where you're not respected, every time you argue just to prove your point, you give away a piece of yourself. You chip away at your own growth just to satisfy the ego. But growth doesn't come from being right. It comes from being free. And freedom often looks like quietly walking away from anything that doesn't align with your values or vision. It's not about proving the other person wrong. It's about knowing what's right for you and honoring that without needing anyone else to agree. When you walk away in silence, you're choosing the future over the past. You're refusing to be anchored by old wounds, old patterns, and old habits that once controlled you. The past will always try to pull you back, to remind you of who you were, to trap you in cycles of pain and reaction. But your silence is your refusal to return to what you've already outgrown. It's your declaration that you are no longer available for the same drama, the same energy drain, the same emotional roller coaster. You're not escaping, you're evolving. The ego loves noise. It thrives on being right, being seen, being validated. But the soul seeks stillness. It doesn't need to win. It needs to heal, to expand, to rise above. When you let your soul lead, you begin to realize that silence is not only a form of protection, it's a sign of transformation. It's you stepping into a higher version of yourself, one that no longer feeds on conflict, but fuels itself with purpose. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to respond to every provocation. Some things simply don't deserve your energy. Some people aren't worth the response. And some situations are best left behind, quietly, gracefully, and without regret. Your peace is your power. Your silence is your strength. And every time you walk away without a word, you're not just leaving behind the noise, you're walking toward a life that finally makes sense. Walking away silently is not weakness. It's evolved strength. It's the kind of strength that doesn't seek attention, doesn't demand recognition, and doesn't require an audience to feel powerful. It is the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove, because they've already proven everything to themselves. This kind of strength is forged in silence, in those private moments when a person chooses to rise above pettiness, above ego, above the desperate need to be heard or understood by people who were never really listening in the first place. To walk away without saying a word is to trust your worth so deeply that you no longer feel the need to explain it. You know who you are. You know what you've given, you know what you deserve. And if someone can't see that, then your silence becomes the only answer they'll get. Not because you're bitter, not because you've given up, but because you've grown past the point of needing external validation to feel whole. There's a quiet power in knowing you can walk away, without slamming the door, without shouting your truth, without demanding closure. That is evolved strength. It's the strength of someone who's been through enough to realize that peace is far more valuable than proving a point. Most people stay in situations longer than they should because they want one last word, one last conversation, one last opportunity to be seen. But someone who walks away silently knows that validation from others is fleeting, while inner peace is permanent. They don't need revenge because they understand that karma works in silence too. They don't need applause because they've stopped performing for the crowd. And they don't need to be right in someone else's story, they're too busy writing a better one of their own. This kind of strength doesn't come overnight. It comes from pain, it comes from disappointment, it comes from learning the hard way that not everyone deserves access to your energy, your heart, or your time. And through those lessons you begin to see that real strength is not reactive, it's selective. It knows when to speak and when to stay silent. It knows when to fight and when to walk away. And most importantly, it knows when to let go, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. There's nothing louder than the silence of someone who's decided they're done. No explanation, no goodbye speech, just a quiet exit that speaks louder than any words ever could. That silence lingers, it echoes, and those left behind feel it in a way they never expected. Because silence, when it comes from strength, becomes unforgettable. So no, walking away silently is not weakness, it is the result of growth. It is the signature of someone who has mastered their emotions, protected their peace, and chosen themselves over chaos. It is a final act of power, a power that requires no noise to be real, no witnesses to be valid, and no outcome to be justified. It simply is. Silence is not emptiness, it's full of clarity. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of understanding, self-control, and inner power. In a world where people talk just to be heard, where arguments erupt over every disagreement, silence is often mistaken for weakness or retreat, but in truth, silence is the most refined form of response. It holds the answers that words often fail to deliver. It holds wisdom that noise can never carry. Silence is not a void, it's a space filled with perspective, patience, and strength. When you choose silence, especially in the face of conflict, you're not choosing to run away, you're choosing to rise above. You're stepping back not because you have nothing to say, but because you've realized that saying it won't change anything. You've realized that peace is more valuable than proving a point. That not every fight is worth your energy, and not every insult needs to be answered. Silence, in those moments, becomes your shield, it becomes your boundary, and it becomes your most powerful message. Silence speaks louder than any argument, because while arguments are driven by ego and emotion, silence is driven by awareness. Anyone can argue, anyone can shout, anyone can throw words into the air hoping they land somewhere meaningful. But to stay quiet when everything in you wants to react, that's rare. That's strength. That's the kind of maturity that can only come from pain, growth, and deep self-respect. And it doesn't just silence the room, it silences the chaos within you. An argument might last a few minutes, an insult might sting for a while, but the echo of silence lasts longer. It lingers, it leaves people wondering, it makes them reflect. Your silence becomes a mirror. They're forced to see themselves clearly, without your words to deflect or distract. And in that space, your power becomes undeniable. Because you didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. You didn't play the game, you simply left the board. And that changes everything. Clarity comes when the noise fades, when you stop defending yourself, explaining yourself, or trying to make others understand what they're not willing to hear. You create space for truth, real, raw, personal truth. You begin to see people for who they are. You begin to see yourself more clearly too. Silence strips away the performance. It reveals what really matters. It helps you prioritize peace over pride, purpose over pressure, and wisdom over winning. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your own well-being to lower yourself to pettiness. Your silence is not passive, it's deliberate. It's not the end of your voice, it's the beginning of your freedom. In silence, there is clarity. In clarity, there is peace. And in peace, There is the kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just exists and transforms everything it touches. Your silence signals the end of control. It is the moment you stop being someone else's emotional puppet, the instant you choose yourself over their manipulation. When you no longer react, when you no longer plead, explain, or argue, you take away the power they once held over you. Silence is not a pause, it's a conclusion. It says without a single word, you no longer have access to me. It is the quiet final chapter to a story that no longer serves your soul. When you leave without a word, it may seem cold, but it's actually the most honest thing you can do. Because words are often wasted on those who don't listen, on those who twist them, on those who only hear what suits their ego. Silence, however, cannot be misinterpreted. It cannot be argued with. It simply is, and its impact is unforgettable. That's why silence stings more than shouting. It cuts deeper than insults. Because it signals that you've moved beyond needing to be heard by someone who never really valued your voice in the first place. And when you walk away in silence, you don't just leave a room, you leave behind the entire structure of control they tried to build around you. You dismantle it without confrontation, without drama, and in doing so you reclaim the one thing they tried to own, your attention. Attention is power. Where your focus goes, your energy flows, and the moment you remove your focus from someone who thrived on your reaction, they're left with nothing. That void, they feel it. That absence, it speaks louder than anything you could have said. They feel the silence echoing in their own mind, forcing them to sit with themselves, perhaps for the first time. Silence is your boundary. It's how you close the door without slamming it, how you protect your dignity without explaining it. It's not about getting even or making a point. It's about walking away with grace and taking your peace with you. And that peace, it can't be stolen, it can't be debated, it can't be touched by anyone who once tried to control you. Because your silence is your liberation. It's the final act of strength from someone who no longer needs closure, revenge, or approval. There's power in restraint, in refusing to entertain chaos, in choosing stillness over storms. People often confuse noise with strength, but true strength is calm. It's measured. It doesn't flinch in the face of provocation. It simply turns and walks away, not because it's weak, but because it knows what's worth fighting for and what's not. So when you leave silently, you are not disappearing, you are reclaiming. You are not hiding, you are healing. You are not avoiding, you are evolving. And those who once tried to control you with games, guilt, or manipulation will feel your silence like thunder, because your silence is not emptiness. It's a boundary, it's a decision, and most of all, it's a statement that you are finally free. Silence is not about walking away, it's about rising above. It's about recognizing your worth without needing anyone to validate it. It's about preserving your peace instead of pouring your energy into people or situations that only drain it. The one who walks away silently isn't weak, they are wise. They are the ones who have felt the chaos, faced the noise, endured the storms, and decided that none of it is worth their soul. Your silence is your boundary. Your calm is your power. And when you choose to walk away without a word, you are not abandoning the fight, you are ending the war with dignity, with strength, with clarity. Let the world shout, let others demand attention, chase closure, beg for recognition. You don't need any of that. You've already won the moment you chose yourself. Because the real power, it begins the moment you stop explaining and start walking silently, unapologetically.